Hello. So my name is Ben Weiss. I'm a reporter at Fortune magazine, and I think before we get into it, maybe we can start with Anthony and have everyone kind of introduce themselves.
I'm having a hard time hearing him.
Yeah, you said introduce yourself. It's tough to hear.
Hi guys, Anthony Scaramucci, founder of SkyBridge Capital, and we also do the Sol conference business as well. Go ahead, Mary.
I'm Marco Santori. I'm the CEO of Solmate. We're a Solana treasury company that builds infrastructure as well. We have a strategic focus in the UAE, specifically in Abu Dhabi. But before this, I was the chief legal officer of Kraken for 5 years and did quite a bit of policy work. So it's nice to be back in the arena.
Dan Tapiero, 50T Funds. We are a growth stage investor in the space. We've invested in 22 of the more, I would say, developed companies. We sit on 8 board seats, about 2 billion AUM. I don't think I've ever done a conference, so this is my first. I'm not sure what I'm going to say up here.
Well, we're not going to be talking too much about policy. Okay. But I think to start us off, just as like setting the stage, we're talking about DeFi adoption. I was doing a quick check of the numbers this morning. I think the height of DeFi TVL, total volume locked, was about 170 billion back in the last bull cycle, like 2021, 2022. We're at 95 now. So I mean, like, we haven't really gotten back to where we were 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I guess, like, what's giving you guys reasons for optimism? I don't know who wants to jump in first. I mean, Marco, you seem like you're chomping at the bit. So.
Yeah, I'm mostly trying to lean in and hear you to make sure that I'm getting your question right. But yeah, what's cause for optimism? Well, look, over the summer, so I'm viewing this from a treasury company perspective, right? Over the summer, investors plowed billions of dollars into treasury companies and were promptly rewarded by a market dislocation, right? Price crashed. But there's something else going on as well. There's this dislocation between headlines and trendlines. All we've seen since then is headlines about how crypto's dead, Bitcoin's going to zero, DeFi is just one hack after another. But the trend lines beg to differ, right? We're seeing exponential growth, actually, in RWAs. We're seeing the Solana blockchain overtake the Ethereum blockchain in stablecoins, the two biggest metas, like the two biggest investment theses in the space. So I don't think the price dislocation is the only thing going on. I think actually the more interesting dislocation is the dislocation between headlines and trend lines, which in the investment world is where people make money, right? That's what's supposed to be interesting for us, is when the whole world out there is looking at the front page of the journal and seeing how bad everything is, you're in the trenches and you can see how good things are getting. That's an investment opportunity, and I think the smart money out there sees it the same way.
Yeah. I mean, Dan, you're a long-time Wall Street veteran. Where's the smart money betting in DeFi?
Well, I mean, look, Marco mentioned it, the movement in stable coins, I mean, on Solana has completely exploded in the last, 9 months or so. And there's a fracturing going on right now in the space where I think traditional people have finally come in, I would say more legitimate type people from the old world, and they're seeing the importance of the technology. I mean, you have even the Secretary Bessent, coming out and putting out that editorial talking about the need to, pass clarity. I think that's reason, for optimism. If you look at, RWAs now have started to grow. One of our companies, Figure, has been, front and center in that world. So it's finding like real world use cases and traditional money people who are part of sort of the old world infrastructure, seeing the value of the technology and also wanting to put payments and money movement on chain. So on the other hand, the sort of crypto degen, crypto native crew and VCs have gotten completely annihilated in the past 9 months. And so you have hacks, you have all sorts of, honestly, garbage that just keeps hitting the space broadly. I think the levels of sort of toxicity on X recently have just been off the charts. And, I also think that The World Liberty Financial discussions on Twitter also have sort of just been a problem generally. I don't really have a strong opinion about a lot of that, but there's a fracturing going on where the legitimate, important parts of blockchain crypto are taking off. And I think we're leaving behind some of the more problematic parts of our world.
Well, I think for Anthony, my question would be, okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
My question would be you have done stuff with RWAs, and you're actively pitching institutional investors, right? As Dan said, and as Marco was talking about, these headlines, it's how do you actually convince them when they saw the drift hack, or they're seeing kind of the back and forth between Justin Sun and the World Liberty Financial people? How do you get them to see value beyond kind of that drama that Dan and Marco were alluding to?
Well, I mean, I want to step back for a second and just remind everybody where we were in, let's say, September, October of 2024. The prior administration hated every single one of you. Okay, don't take it personally, but it's just that's what they did. And they were rough on us in a way that I think was unconscionable if you really want the United States to be the mantle of financial services leadership in the future. And I can take you back to July of 2024, where Mike Novogratz, myself, Mark Cuban, representatives from Ripple, a whole host of places, descended on Washington and met with Biden administration staff talking about these issues. And then we had a follow-up meeting at Treasury, and the feedback went from bad to worse. So I just want to remind everybody where we were. And so whatever my personal feelings, that I've been somewhat, if not very critical of President Trump at times, the administration objectively is pro-crypto, and you just heard from an official in the White House. And so I would take the Trump administration over the Biden administration for this industry any day of the week. The one issue, though, that I do think is hurting us is that the president and his family decided that they wanted to get in the industry. And I do think, and I said this, I was on a panel with Brian Armstrong at Davos in January of 2025. I said the meme coin activity is going to slow down the regulatory process only because the president's opponents, whatever you think of the meme coin activity, whether you like it or you dislike it, the president's opponents will vote against him on issues that he wants because they're in opposition of him. And it would have been better for the industry if the president didn't launch a Melania and a Trump meme coin. And I think those things are very objective, and I'm trying to say it in the most apolitical way possible. So what's at risk now is the Clarity Act, because you look at things like Greenland or look at the war in Iran, you can't look at them in isolation. They collect in terms of the way people view themselves in opposition to the president and the administration. And so I would like to think that that act gets done. It would be amazing for our industry. It would, I think, trigger a revitalization of share or token appreciation, share appreciation in the case of digital asset treasuries. But my guess is right now that it's unlikely to happen in the near term. And that's bad for all of us, because if you get into the midterms and the Democrats take the House, they're going to be more reluctant to push this regulation forward. So the industry will be fine because we have been fine, and you just look at the stupendous growth over 16 years. But I really would like to get this done and find a way to get it into a post-partisan position.
I think, Marco, one question I have for you is, we're talking about DeFi. So it's traditionally when you think of DeFi, it's the Wild West of crypto. A lot of, as Dan was saying, these crypto degens trading on chain, no KYC, no compliance monitoring for a lot of these protocols. You're talking to a lot of institutional investors. Do they have worries about kind of people issuing tokenized, money market funds that are then playing with DeFi protocols? What are you kind of hearing from these people in terms of their worries about the regulatory and compliance landscape?
Good question. I got to make one correction, though. DeFi is not the Wild West of crypto. DeFi is the point of crypto. Okay, like,
Well-
and for 5 years at Kraken, I was actually outside counsel for 2 more years prior to that. So give it 7 years of me and Jesse and a couple of other folks at Kraken. We would talk all the time about how we have to build the bridge before we can burn it down, right? We were criticized all the time about having this pirate culture, but also doing KYC to FATF standards, right? There's a dissonance there. Our view was that that was a bridge, that KYC, that TradFi, FATF compatible mandate that we had was a bridge that we had to build to get people into the world of crypto. But I think we all wanted to burn it down when we were done, right? That's the point, is to get there. So maybe it's nitpicky, but I think it's an important philosophical point. And smart investors, or at least the investors that I will resonate with inevitably, are the ones who recognize that and see that there's many paths to that world, and that world is not monolithic. It's not necessarily going to be what it looks like today by any stretch. There's no investors looking for a permissioned chain to invest in through a treasury company. Like, it's not for the long term. There are short-term flippers that see speculative opportunity, but they don't see value.
But I think there's a worry of co-option, right? Like, I think a lot of people in the long-time crypto investors, a lot of people who have been watching this space, they're watching all this institutional interest, like JP Morgan doing some sort of permission, tokenized deposits, and that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the two worlds are going to coexist. You're going to have permission chains. You've got Canton now, which is picking up quite a lot of momentum. I would reiterate Anthony's point, though, from before. I mean, it's night and day from 3, 4, 5 years ago. You know, this administration has said they want to make America the sort of the crypto blockchain capital of the world. And I think the US has now moved so far ahead of everybody else in terms of how we're thinking about the space that other regions around the world are too far behind even to catch up. So I do think, even though, as you mentioned, the volume, the TVL is down quite a lot, I think that it's a better quality TVL today than maybe it was back then. So I wouldn't necessarily read that as negative.
Are you, like, you know, as a growth equity investor, like, are you looking to invest in DeFi protocols? Are you looking to invest in DeFi opportunities?
No, well, we don't invest directly in any cryptocurrency, and we never have, and we likely won't. I think there's still confusion as to where revenue accrues, and you know, if it's clear, and you know, if it's clear vis-a-vis a specific project, I think that maybe makes some difference. But you know, the space is still figuring itself out. So I'd go back to that point. I think you are going to see this world of permissioned and permissionless. And then I think what's exciting in terms of, you know, you want to be optimistic, is this world of autonomous agents transacting independently. That's all going to happen in DeFi, and I think there'll be a lot of it happening on Solana as well. So, and that's a TAM of hundreds, I think thousands of trillions of potential transactions. And it's just started, but we're very excited about finding the businesses that are building that infrastructure, because we think there's going to be an entirely sort of agentic digital asset economy that interacts with the human one. But it may not, we don't know, but I think that's the, you know, the big open-ended, exciting future.
Yeah, I mean, like, Anthony, for you, because you did a tokenized treasury thing or tokenized thing with Avalanche, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about that and kind of the thinking in terms of how it would play with the broader DeFi ecosystem, because I think that's kind of getting at the value of what people find.
So, the reason, again, I'm a multi-chain person, and obviously wrote a book about Solana and love Solana, but the Avalanche thing was specific to a group of our clients in the TradeFi world that were using Avalanche, so it made it easier for us to market that specific fund on the Avalanche chain because the CTOs at those wirehouses were using Avalanche. But more broadly, if you're thinking about tokenization and you take Larry Fink's approach to tokenization, Solana, to me, is going to be this super highway for most stocks, most bonds. And maybe flip it back to Marco for a second, because his old firm just did a deal with the NASDAQ, where you're going to likely have, I don't know how quickly you think it'll be, but assuming inside of the next year, we'll have 24/7 tokenized trading, right?
I think so. And the way for that to happen is not going to be via some implementation that improves post-trade settlement by 6 hours. Like, that's not why we're here, right? That's not why we're here. We're here because these things should be trading natively on-chain. I'm here specifically in the Solana ecosystem because I think Solana is the best chain for that. If things are trading on-chain 24/7 natively, it's got to be one that has the capacity, that has the throughput for it. Like, no one on Wall Street is talking about Ethereum. Folks on Wall Street are talking about the values that bring them to crypto, and I think Solana is where that is.
Yeah, I think, just jumping off of the tokenization train, I mean, I know you guys are not in the DC world, but because we are at a Washington meets Wall Street event, and this is kind of the DeFi panel, I'm wondering if any of you guys are paying attention to kind of the tensions between DeFi and CeFi and kind of the policy discussions and also kind of, the visions of what this crypto ecosystem is going to look like. I know, Marco, this is kind of getting at like, it's all going to be one, but there are some tensions that are being played out, right?
I wouldn't know. I don't know.
Yeah, look, between the centralized exchanges and those participants in DeFi projects, call them the DeFi exchanges, right? There's no tension. That's not a thing in the community. Like, yeah, everybody fights about everything, but there's no philosophical tension between those two things. CeFi is integrated into DeFi and vice versa. We're seeing banks integrate into DeFi platforms for custody and lending and collateral management relationships, right? These things are coexisting and they're thriving together. So out in the commercial world, what's happening in the real world is collaboration. And
what do you think is spurring that? Is it just like the maturation of these protocols? Is it like more policy? Like, what do you think is the reason for why that's happening?
This was the whole point, right? We wanted interoperability from day one. I remember back in 2014, I was in private practice, right? One of the big themes was getting all of the chains to talk to each other. None of those other chains are around, right? It's just Bitcoin that has survived to do that, right? But that's been an ongoing theme, both in policy and in investment, for the duration, for the whole thing, right? Since the first altcoin, back in 20, I think late 2012 or early 2013 was when the first altcoin came out. I think yes, you have to admit. Back when I was a policy professional, CeFi projects who could hire guys in suits to go walk around Capitol Hill, well, as one of those guys in suits, we would have to take a lot of flack for what was happening on DeFi. But I think there's very few of us, at least those of us who were with projects that had longevity, that had durability, that really complained on a philosophical level, because I think we all recognize that that's the whole point. All the CeFi exchanges are doing is improving liquidity for what's going on chain, which is the whole point of this stuff.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, Anthony, do you have anything to kind of add to this, or before I move on to the next topic, or? No, sorry, this is the thing. Do you have anything to add to what kind of Marco was talking about?
I probably the thing I would add is probably perspective. Dan and I were talking backstage. The asset class is very volatile, and there's an aphorism that I learned at Goldman like 35 years ago. Everybody's a long-term investor until they have short-term losses, and the minute they have short-term losses, they rethink their whole investment thesis. But if you stay in things of high quality, Solana, Bitcoin, things like this, I think you're rewarded over time as these things get adopted. And one of the things that's happened here is you've got regulatory headwinds, because what Marco's talking about could have happened 5 years ago. You could have had on-chain tokenized stocks and bonds trading 24/7 the way crypto trades at minimal costs relative to the way we're doing it in the old system. But the old system doesn't want to give up, and they pay a lot of money to their lobbyists to stay in business. And so I think it's important to recognize that throughout history, anytime the technology was better, even if you had regulatory resistance, the technology got adopted. And just quickly, the best example I always give is Uber. Nobody in this city, from a taxi commission point of view or a lobbyist at City Hall, the mayor himself wanted Uber. But the people wanted Uber. So we eventually got it. And so we just have to be patient and see our way through the next 24 to 36 months.
Yeah.
And I would also say that the integration is happening maybe in ways that people didn't necessarily expect. I mean, you have, you've got Polymarket and you've got Hype, and all of a sudden, Hype there's more silver trading on Hype than, on the CME or whatever it was that happened, a few months ago. And so it's naturally integrating, and the market is determining, how it integrates, right? It may not necessarily integrate the way that we anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up Hyperliquid, and in terms of DeFi world, that's always an interesting kind of in-between case. I'm curious what you guys think about, DeFi projects that might be CeFi or more centralized, and kind of like how they're branding themselves. I don't know, Anthony, you seem like you're nodding. So can you hear what I'm saying or no?
I'm having a hard time hearing, but you're talking about DeFi projects.
Yeah, I was saying for Hyperliquid, it's kind of in between, right, of this DeFi and CeFi world.
No, look, listen, it's a good product, but Solana, in the right regulatory environment, like Marco said, is arguably the best platform. It's fast, it's cheap, it's easy to use, it's easy to build on, and you can create that uniformity of system. If you think about the way we like to adopt things from a technological perspective, it has all of the features that could make it the universal system. It's sort of like the Microsoft operating system from 30 years ago. And so for me, Hyperliquid is a good product. There'll be other products, there'll be niche products in there. But again, think of the biggest asset managers in the world, and think of the biggest Wall Street banks. If you're having private discussions with their CTOs, their default is to use Solana.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of the Hyperliquid versus Solana versus like CeFi, DeFi kind of rhetoric and controversy?
And I agree with Anthony on this. This is I think the hybrid is nice. It's a good bridge, right? Yeah. But ultimately, what's going to make these systems work and what's going to make them demonstrate value rather than hype for Liquid is actual on-chain functionality, right? The more you move back to centralized servers, the less value you're going to see in the long term from having made the migration in the first place. I'm just not that excited by it. I've seen a lot of that over the last 15, 16 years I've been doing this. Sounds really great, people make a lot of money, and then hype kind of fades.
Yeah, I mean, this is, in terms of things people are excited about. Dan, I know you're super excited about agentic finance and kind of stablecoin payments across chains for like micropayments. Like, talk to me a little bit about how you see kind of agentic finance playing with, potentially DeFi protocols or kind of going on chain.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, this is very early and super venture at the moment. I told you we don't invest in venture. But we keep a close eye on it because the growth has been crazy. I think you're probably going to have the agents are going to decide which chains to interact with. And, maybe they're doing it in their own little chat groups that are agent only. I don't know. And I don't know what the final arbiter will be for where they go or how they do it. It might be liquidity. And, as Marco mentioned, certainly stable coins on Solana have completely exploded the last 6 months. Maybe that becomes the attractor. Success builds on success. But it's just hard to know. I think Solana's built for that. I think it's built for the ability to absorb a huge number of transactions, and so. But it's unknown. Like it's still too early.
Yeah.
I guess, Anthony or Marco, in terms of like agentic finance, like how do you kind of see that playing out across DeFi protocols on Solana?
Why don't you go first, Marco?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I mean, look, we've been preaching for a long time that when we started giving AI agents the reins, this is before we knew what the heck they were going to do or what they were going to be, right? This is a decade ago. They weren't going to open checking accounts, right? I mean, like this is one of the long-term thesis arcs that we followed in this industry. That I think is finally starting to pay off, and we're seeing it with Claude and Moltbots and like all the rest. We're seeing these agents actually use crypto before they're given access to traditional financial rails, which is exactly what a permissionless system is supposed to do. So, it's all kind of going to plan in that sense, which is really great to see, right? I think we all would have been a little terrified if it would have gone any other way with AI agents. What I'd like to see more of, is tighter integrations, actually, between developers on DeFi and developers who are building new agentic tools. Yeah. I think that can start happening at like a more fundamental level than it is now, because right now it's kind of being those connection points, right, are being hacked together a little bit higher up in the stack, and I think it's the kind of thing that gives this so much value that it should be done ab initio.
Anthony, do you have a Scaramucci bot, trading on Solana?
So I guess what I would say, just to emphasize what Marco's saying, is you got to think of the future by observing the past, and just go back 25 years and think of where we were with the internet. It was clunky. We were using it to buy books on Amazon, maybe a Pez gun on eBay, and maybe we were answering emails on AOL. And now if you think about it today, there's trillions of dollars of transactions on the internet. We're streaming. There's billions of people streaming 4K video on the internet, and the applications have exploded. And so I would just ask you to think about DeFi, Solana, the world we're in, where it's going. Dan had a great slide. We were speaking together, I think it was in Zurich, Dan, and he showed a slide of where we were relative to Web 1. And where are we now, Dan, relative to Web 1?
I think it's like we're 2003.
So just think about where we were in 2003, and imagine you could beam yourself back there and buy those great Web 1 companies. That's where you are today in this space.
Cool. Okay, with that, we're going to close up. Thank you for everyone for listening to us, and I think it's next time for lunch.
Hey, well done, by the way.